Thank you so much for joining again. My name is Sasha Leggett. I am Commissioner Rodney Ellis's Deputy Director over our policy team. Some of you should have gotten my contact information in the invite that went out. So if you have follow-up questions or concerns or ideas that you want to share, please make sure that you follow up with me following the meeting. I'm going to ask that you all try to stay on mute until we get to the question and answer part of the meeting. And if you check the chat, I just put the agenda in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So Commissioner Ellis, whenever you are ready to go.
Hey, thank you all for coming on. We're going to keep this to 45 minutes. The purpose of this is a call to action. I've been involved on minority business, women enterprise issues for a very long time, maybe before some of you all were born. Don't take that as condescending. Just use that as a reflection of how old I am. When Ann Richards was governor in '91, I quietly placed the item in the state law to do a $1 million disparity study. I'll never forget, Governor Richards called me in and said that then Comptroller John Sharp and somebody on the staff said I'd slipped in this $1 million study in the budget to see if minorities and women had been discriminated against, to which she said, "Don't you think you can figure that out, Rodney, for a little less than $1 million?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, Governor, but that's what the law requires." And the reason it requires that is because there are people who don't want to level the playing field. It's a lawsuit, famous lawsuit. You ought to Google it. You ought to know about the Croson lawsuit, one of the worst decisions in the history of the United States Supreme Court, but it is the law. If you want to have a program geared to help minority women-owned businesses, it has been narrowly tailored remedy. You have to do a disparity study, which is like reconstructing your tax returns to see whether or not they have been left out and measure that against their capacity in a region to do the work. So the state of Texas did it. It was the first major state, in my judgment, large state, to do a disparity study in 1991. State did set up a program. She put the rules in place before she left the governor's mansion. They're still pretty much in place. They're not perfect. They have a graduation standard to them. But hey, in Texas, it is transparent. You know what percentage goes to minority women-owned businesses. This is not enough, but you know. Roll forward. The city council had done a program in 1984 when I was on council, sort of throwing punches like I've been known to do throughout my career. You didn't have to do a disparity study, but the city of Houston set up a program. Some challenges with it. I was so busy trying to get the goal up higher, I didn't focus on what I think was a little monkey wrench they threw in there. Separate issue with my friends from the city on the call, but you know, I certainly was the catalyst for getting that program at the city. They don't let you count your MWBE status towards the goal if you get to be a prime. In my judgment, that keeps you on the back of the bus. That's why the city's program, with the positive attributes they are, they have a larger spend, I believe, with minority women-owned businesses than anybody else in the county. But it is mainly subcontractor work, because if you get to be a prime, you still have to meet the goal, which keeps you from being able to build capacity, in my judgment. County didn't do that. City has a program, state has a program. When I got to Commissioner's Court, I sensed my leverage when that Harvey bond issue was coming up. So I was making noises about the county having a program. I was told, you can do the study, which is the first step. You pay for it. We did. I went to Mayor Turner. He agreed to an interlocal. We hired Colette Ho, who worked on the state of Texas study. First major one, maybe the first one done in Texas. I don't think any city or county had done one in 1991. She worked on it back then. She still looks the same age she did in 91. She's going to talk a bit. But look, after we did that at the county, you know, a lot of people who claim credit now were ducking when we were fighting the fight. Couldn't find it. But that's okay. Even if it's some of you, I'm not ribbing you about that. But after, mute your phone now, my friend. Mute your phone, somebody, 832, it might be you. Just mute your phone. After the county did it, then we focused on Metro and the port. They did not have minority women business enterprise programs. And I'd love for you to throw in that chat box some of those letters, like people telling me, oh, we have a great small business program. We've gotten awards from the minority groups, the women groups, to which I said, you buy a table at my banquet, I'll give you a damn award too. It was a joke. All of the numbers came back somewhat comparable. Metro's numbers were better than others. The county's numbers were just embarrassing. You look at the summary, you don't have to read the whole study. I'll give you one factoid. 0.5% of Harris County's spending went to Black-owned businesses. 0.5. At the port, I think that African-American number, I just remember that off the top of my head, was a little worse. It might have been 0.3. I may be a little off, but it was pretty bad. Metro's numbers are slightly better, but nowhere near where people thought they were. As a result of that, I left out Harris Health. It's just an oversight. I assumed it was in the county study. It was not. Harris Health is doing a study. Fort Bend County is doing a study. I'm told Missouri City is about to do the study. Now, here's the purpose of this call. It just, I thought about it in the middle of the night on one of these bike rides that you all joke about. Elections are up now for school boards and community colleges. And so I went and met with the superintendent of HISD, sent him a letter, which you probably have in the chat box. I sent it. He told me they have a program and 30% of their business goes to minority women-owned businesses. He's brand new. I think a lot of Superintendent House, by the way, is very impressed with him. I would question whether it's 30%, but I don't know. I don't know if they have B2G now or some comparable entity like B2G that lets you measure it. But if their numbers are 30%, they'd be the highest, be higher than the city. City is about 25% through their program. But if they do, he'd be wise to go do a disparity study because at some point it might get challenged. I'm not pushing folks who in the disparity study business, but we're in an environment where people will litigate. But so some of you need to get active. I mean, I'm not the Black chamber, I'm not the Hispanic chamber, I'm not the Asian American chamber, I'm not the women's chamber. But I'm sensitive to this issue because I know what a difference it made in my life. And my mentor would expect no less of me. You all need to get active and advocate to these school boards and community colleges to go start programs. I'm going to pull together a meeting. Hope you all will come. I'm going to invite all of the trustees of color and sensitive ones that I think might just invite all of them. Do the Hest House or somewhere, do a little lunch, but don't wait on me. That's why you are the women's chamber, the Black chamber, the Hispanic chamber, the Asian American chamber. Start chambering. And I'm just lighting the fuse. I called Sunny Messiah. She was very helpful when we were pushing for these studies, her paper. Before we could get in the mainline press, we had the Houston Defender, Black-owned paper. She's doing something with the National Black Newspaper Publishers today. So she asked me to tape this. She'll watch it later. Plus, we'll put it on social media. But look, you don't have to walk around here with a hat in your hand, holding your head down, saying small businesses. You can say minority and women-owned businesses. Small businesses just tend to not hit the mark. You got to measure the numbers. Now, if I've done my part, I'm on mute, but I'm here and eat my sandwich.
Yes, Commissioner Ellis, this is Dr. Laura Murillo. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for opening the door and allowing us to walk next to you. We will continue to speak out and speak up. We were there all along the way, and it's made a difference. I serve now on the Port Authority's Equity Commission. They gave a report yesterday. The numbers are looking much better. We agree with you. Your assessment more needs to be done now in these other entities. And we were there with you at the beginning, and we're going to be with you every time you knock on a door. So thank you again. I'll go ahead and mute now.
Thank you, Doc. And, you know, on that point, I just want to mention people who I think are sensitive to this issue run the Houston Community College Board. They run the Houston Independent School District Board. They run A-Leaf, I think. People of color and women. And they don't have to be minorities. Sometimes the strongest advocates don't necessarily look like me or speak Spanish or be a female. But now's the time. Now, I won't eat this sandwich, Sasha. Did I hit everything I was supposed to hit?
Yes, sir, you did. And now, for those of you on the call, we're going to have Colette Ho of Colette Ho and Associates to go through a presentation. She's going to share her screen and talk about the importance of disparity studies, how they work, and why we need to make sure that we're using them and getting them done for our regional strategy approach. Oh, and also, Colette, you might want to introduce yourself and let everybody know how wonderful you are.
Well, thank you, Sasha. I appreciate that. That's a nice introduction. So thanks, everyone. And of course, thank you to Commissioner Ellis. He and I have known each other since back in the 90s when I first started my firm, and the city of Austin was my very first client. And he makes good trouble, as the dear departed John Lewis like to say, and has been a leader in these issues for 25 plus years. So I'm always delighted to participate in anything he asks me to. I do disparity studies and work on programs and testify in federal court. And I've been involved with these issues myself since 1989 when I was an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Chicago, which is where I'm from. But I now live in San Antonio. I married a guy whose family's down here a couple years ago. And so now I'm a Texas resident, so not so far away from Houston. We were delighted and honored to be chosen to perform the disparity study for Harris County. And I have a little slide about that in a second, but we're also doing the disparity study for Harris Health. And certainly, I think it's clear that effective political leadership and people coming together is the key to making something happen. So I have a PowerPoint just to talk about a couple of issues. I promise to be brief and that we are going to stay on Commissioner Ellis's schedule. You're all very busy. And so we will leave plenty of time for questions. So I thought by just spending a second saying what these programs are. People use terms differently, and I wasn't sure exactly who the audience was going to be, so I wanted to be sure we're all beginning from the same level of knowledge. So when we talk about MWBE programs or DBE programs, what we really mean are race and gender conscious programs that focus on remediating the effects of discrimination in contracting and procurement markets. There are sometimes other types of studies, but really what we're talking about here is the buying of stuff. And certainly the government is a major driver of the Houston area economy. And so taking a look to make sure that women and minorities have equal opportunities to do work for the county, the school districts, the city, TxDOT, whatever, is really critically important to growing our communities and providing economic opportunity for everyone. One thing to keep in mind is that the labels don't matter. I hear this relatively frequently. Oh, we don't run a DBE program, we run a minority business program. Well, the federal courts don't care. Judges are not fooled by what labels you put on things. Usually when people say DBE, they're referring to the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program of the US Department of Transportation. And those regulations are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations in Title 49, Part 26. For those of you that may be doing work at the airport or for Houston Metro on its Federal Transit Administration contracts, or for TxDOT, that's really the program that controls. And I apologize, there's construction going on outside this window, and I've been trying to get him to stop for a little bit, but we'll see. Usually when people use the term MWBE, they're referring to a state or local program, such as Harris County's new MWBE program, or they might be talking about the state of Texas's HUB program, historically underutilized business. But really the point is that in the end, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it's a race or gender conscious contracting program, it's subject to the same framework that Commissioner Ellis mentioned. Oh, I just skipped one there. So why do these programs matter? Well, I think we can certainly say that across the country, both nationally and in local jurisdictions, it's really quite clear that if there are no MBE goals, minority and women firms will get very little to no work. The county's utilization of Black-owned firms was so low that when we were doing this study, I made my contracting staff go back through every keystroke to make sure we hadn't made a mistake because that was so low, so vastly beneath what the availability is out there, that we wanted to make sure that we just hadn't made some kind of a computational error somewhere. Well, we hadn't. And so Harris County's experience is very much in line with what we see other places. When agencies have been sued and had to discontinue their programs, we often see the participation disappear overnight. So it is really critical to have goals. And in order to have goals, you have to have a defensible program, and we'll get to that in just a second. Certainly for the US DOT DBE program, there's a very extensive congressional record going back decades now. We worked on reauthorizing the DBE program summer before last, I guess it is now. And I was delighted to be part of that team that worked with Representative Clybourne's office, Representative Lee, and the Senate as well to get that program reauthorized. We did conduct the disparity study for Harris County that was finished last year. And you can see there what we found. There was certainly ample quantitative and qualitative evidence that supports the need and the county's right to have a race and gender conscious program. There were large and significant disparities between the county's utilization of minority women-owned firms and who was available to participate on county prime and subcontracts. So really what you look at is how tight is the fit between who is available and who actually got used. We also took a look at disparities throughout the greater Houston economy using some census databases and found that disparities were just as entrenched in the overall economy and that Harris County reflected the market failure of discrimination. We did interview dozens of minority and women-owned firms as part of this project, and they told us that they still experience negative perceptions and biases, exclusion from networks, unequal access to credit, and stereotyping about their capabilities. So that's what it makes disparity studies and these programs important. But let's spend just a couple minutes on what the legal standards are, because these are not intuitive to people. And unfortunately, we do have to live within them. As Commissioner Ellis mentioned, the Croson decision, City of Richmond, that's Richmond, Virginia, versus Croson from 1989, really did restrict what we can do in terms of operating race and gender conscious programs. And I completely agree with him that in the end, it's one of the most disgraceful decisions that the court has ever given us. And we've just had to live with it ever since. There's a two-pronged test that you have to meet if you are a government agency. You have to establish that you have a quote unquote compelling interest in remedying discrimination. As a practical matter, this means whether or not you have a strong basis of evidence that race and gender continue to infect your contracting market. Your remedies must be narrowly tailored to that evidence. So here's some magic legal words today, is compelling interest and narrow tailoring. Those are the two tests that an agency must meet if it's sued in federal court. That's about race. It's a little unclear what the standard is for gender. Although I think as a practical matter, it's hard for me to believe that the courts would uphold a program for white women, but not for Black men. But in theory, there's a lesser standard of review for programs that are gender-based. We'll see about that. Important to know that location, size, veteran status, disability, those are not required to meet this very high level of judicial review called strict constitutional scrutiny. All they have to meet is a rational basis, which means does the legislature have basically any rationale for what it chose to do. So that's a pretty low bar. So let's talk for a second about disparity studies. So what is a disparity study? Well, it's quantitative and qualitative evidence that addresses whether firms enjoy full and fair opportunities to compete for the agency's work, regardless of race or gender. So it really is a non-discrimination lens, which is a little bit different than sometimes I think what people mean when they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The federal courts are very clear that these programs must be designed to remedy the identified effects of race or gender discrimination. You have to have quantitative evidence look at disparities, look at the economy. You have to have qualitative evidence, which is standing alone is not enough. But we do like to do surveys and do interviews. And for the Harris County study, we certainly did talk to lots and lots of people. All right, so let's turn to what works, because in the end, the studies are not an objective. They are simply a tool to get you to someplace. And what I think that someplace is supposed to be is an effective program that makes sure that everyone has a full and fair opportunity to compete for an agency's contracts. So as we've been talking about, you need a solid evidentiary basis for your program. You have to have the leadership commitment. You know, I can write you anything, but if leadership is not committed to it, then it really doesn't matter. And that means being willing to put resources towards the program, which Harris County certainly has with the new program that we're in the process of working on to get that up and running. So you see there the successful elements of successful programs, I guess I should say. You need narrowly tailored goals that are directly related to the scopes of work of the project. You need a rigorous certification program with standards and rigorous review. You need clear standards for how your program is going to operate, how you're going to count minority or woman or disadvantaged participation, what kind of good faith efforts criteria are you going to have so that if people cannot meet the goal, they can still be awarded the project, even if they didn't meet the goal, but they made a good faith effort to do so. You want to ensure that your program is not riddled with fraud, which means that your certified firms must perform a commercially useful function. They can't be a pass-through through which dollars are sent simply to create the appearance of participation. You need complete and timely monitoring. And this is often the weak link in programs, is that people have goals and they do all that, but they don't actually see whether or not the minority and women firms are getting the work that they were supposed to. Prompt payment, not paying people on time will just kill small firms, to just kill them. And then finally, technical assistance. What helps people to do business with the agency and in the wider marketplace? Is it assistance with estimating, safety, how to do certified payrolls, all those kinds of things that small firms can often use a lot of support for. So a few parting thoughts, really. You know, we have leadership through Commissioner Ellis and others, but everyone really is in this together. These programs won't work unless everyone is committed to making them work and understands that this is just how it's going to be. So from the standpoint of the agency, you know, make the commitment, make sure that you have resourced your program adequately. When I talk to a new client and find out that 2 people are responsible for the MWBE program and the Title VI and the Americans with Disability Act and the internal EEO and the workforce, well, I know that people aren't serious because you just can't get it done like that. And one of the things I want to always publicly commend Commissioner Ellis for and Harris County is being willing to put the resources together to put a program together that will work. And that's a very, very exciting opportunity. Get yourselves a good disparity study. Do try to review all your operations through an equity lens. There's always a tendency, it's very human, for us all to just keep doing what we've been doing, especially if it's been working for us. But perhaps there are things that could be done that would make it easier for small and minority and women-owned firms to do business. Make sure you're conducting outreach about your individual projects, but also about industries. Help people to get in front of your decision makers so that they have a chance to market themselves, so that the next time maybe the engineering department goes, hey, you know, we met that Sasha and she seemed to be really on the ball. You know, maybe we should reach out to her, those kinds of things. Again, pay promptly. I just can't stress this enough. Get rid of paper. Paper bids, you know, in-person meetings, all of these things are very burdensome for small firms. So here's your chance. And think about mentor-protege programs and supportive services. Turning to non-DBE prime bidders and proposers who are a critical leg of the 3 legs for a stool to have a program work together. Again, commitment, commitment, commitment. Try to get outside your comfort zone. People do business with people they know and like, but there may be other people out there that can do great work for you who don't look like you. And so you kind of sometimes push yourselves to do that. Do plan ahead. Don't wait until the next big project to go out and cultivate relationships with MWBEs and working with the organizations. And I saw the names of some people I recognize who I think are on this call. And they are here to work with you and to help you. Again, pay promptly, there's a theme here, and communicate with your DBEs. Make sure they know what's going on about a project. Don't treat them like mushrooms. Turning to the MWBE community, be ready. Make sure that you have the skills and the tools that you're going to need to succeed. People will help you, but they're not going to babysit you. And all too often, I'm afraid, I hear firms say, well, you know, nobody called me. Well, perhaps they didn't, but you have to market yourselves. It's not easy. I appreciate that. We are a small firm. I was by myself for many years, so I do understand the burdens, but you know, this is how it is, and this is what you have to step up to. Make sure you read your contracts. All too often people don't, and then they look up and they go, can they do this to me? And the answer is yes, they can, because you signed it. And it won't do to say, well, I didn't understand it or I didn't read it. That's not how contract law works. Make sure you get help. Ask for help when you need it. Put your ego aside and look to people who can support you and guide you. And then finally, do plan for growth and graduation for when you aren't eligible in this program. So I'm going to stop there, Sasha. How am I doing on time? Do I have time to talk about a couple of very alarming cases that I think people should know about? If not, I'll stop here. Good? Okay. All right. Well, I want other people to be as frightened as I am these days because we've talked about the very high standards that the federal courts have for these types of programs. They're really downright hostile. And the current makeup of the Supreme Court certainly doesn't give me any comfort about what would happen if we really got the right case in front of these very conservative justices. But there's some cases out there that people should keep their eyes on. And perhaps the most important one is what's often styled in the regular media as the Black farmers case. As part of the COVID Recovery Act legislation, the United States Department of Agriculture had a program for assistance to Black farmers. And the USDA was sued almost instantly. They have been represented, the plaintiffs, by right-wing legal groups, many of whom formed with former members of the Trump administration, including one that is the brainchild of Stephen Miller. For those of you who remember him, he had the children in the cages policy, that guy. And they are alleging that the program to assist socially and economically disadvantaged farmers is illegal, race-based reverse discrimination, that because the statute engages in race-based decision-making, it is per se illegal, and that the plaintiffs will suffer irreparable harm. I want to focus on the complaint that was filed in Texas. I think we're up to 12 different states where these cases are pending now. But the Texas one is probably the most important one. The plaintiff is our very own Secretary of Agriculture, Sid Miller, who took one of those cheek swab tests and has discovered he has 2% African ancestry. And so I suppose in that mind, he now believes that he's African American. But the complaint alleges that white ethnic groups have unquestionably suffered past prejudice, and they talk about prejudice against the Irish and the Italians back at the turn of the last century. They complain that the statute does not state what percentage of blood or lineage is required to qualify, and that any ethnic ancestry should be sufficient. And you know you're kind of in litigation theater when the plaintiffs start discussing Homer Plessy of the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, and they even take a swipe at Elizabeth Warren, sort of an allusion to President Trump's calling her Pocahontas, for those of you that remember that. So the complaint really does read much more like some type of polemic than it does what you traditionally would see in a legal complaint, but it's pretty interesting. So what has happened? All the courts that so far have rendered the decision have held that the program is unconstitutional, and it discriminates against whites because it uses racial criteria for eligibility for program inclusion. The Texas judge says specifically that there's no evidence that there's current discrimination against Black farmers, that they should have tried race neutral alternatives. They don't kind of specify what those might be. But anyway, the relief is too broad and particularly worrisome. There's sort of the implication that you need to meet an intentional test, which has never been the law, that you have to prove that everybody at USDA is discriminated against Black farmers in order to do something about the egregious results of the way USDA has operated in the past. The court did grant a nationwide injunction against the program, as well as class action status for white plaintiffs all across the country. I don't know if there are any lawyers on here, but if you follow this, you know how very difficult it's become to get a class action certified. And the fact that they were willing to do it here, I think really speaks volumes about really how politicized this issue really is. And again, since I made these slides a couple of days ago, I did this presentation, sort of a similar one anyway, on Tuesday. And then we found out that there are even more complaints that have been filed. Finally, let's turn to the restaurant relief fund case. This is also worrisome, sort of less so because it's pretty much going to go away, but the thinking about it is disturbing. This again was a COVID relief measure that provided that for 21 days, priority for applications for the funds that would be made by small restaurants owned by minorities, women, and veterans would get priority. Some of you may remember that back in the early days of the pandemic, when the PPP loans were first being given out, and you heard very large restaurants were getting lots and lots of money. This case has already gone up to the Court of Appeals, and we've lost. And the court said that race neutral measures should have been tried first. Racial categories were too broad. And now we have the worst possible outcome for everybody, which is that the program's been enjoined and nobody's gotten any money. So with that, let me stop. And I know Commissioner want to leave time for conversation and questions, and I'm happy to jump in there if it's appropriate.
Thank you so much, Colette, for going through this presentation. It's really important for us to understand why disparity studies are important, how they work, especially as we go and start, or you all go and start the advocacy in other entities for the creation of MWBE programs. The idea is for it to be a regional strategy, and it's important for everyone to get involved. And while Colette kind of talked about some of the concerns and the things that everyone needs to be aware of in terms of the lawsuits that she mentioned, it is not for anyone to be discouraged to continue to push for these programs, because they're extraordinarily important. They're extraordinarily important for the growth and expansion and access to opportunities for MWBEs. And we want to make sure that this region is doing its part to make sure that they are prioritizing those kinds of businesses. So if there are people who have questions, please raise your hand. The hosts on the call are going to unmute you so you can ask your questions. And Angelica and/or Taylor, it looks like Ms. Carol Guest, she physically raised her hand and I saw her. So if you could unmute her so she could ask her question, that would be great.
Please tell me it's not me that has to do the unmuting. Look, I know you're gonna get to the ask, by the way, Carol, while they're trying to get to you. This really is an Atlanta moment, and we're gonna ask you all to help us advocate to all of these community colleges and school boards, anyone else that I think may do it while she's trying to figure out how to unmute you. Is it me, by the way? Do I have to unmute her? You know, I know the Greater Houston Partnership has agreed to a program that Robert Smith, who paid the tuition for the students at Morehouse, he's picked 6 cities around America where they are encouraging the private sector step up and increase their diversity spend with MWBEs. I think they have some big event next week. I think it's the day of the commission meeting. But we want to do everything we can with these governmental entities, leading to hopefully some positive things coming out of Robert Smith's effort. He has the Boston Consulting Group. They put it together, great metrics, very aggressive about it. I should have mentioned earlier, Commissioner Garcia and I have talked about this, and he's in lockstep with me. We're getting ready to go to Commissioner's Court to talk about redistricting. That's why I'm suiting up with the tie and everything, by the way. Did you figure out how to unmute them? But
yes.
Let them know.
Yes, you should be able to unmute yourself at this time to ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Sasha.
You're welcome.
So my question for Colette is, well, it's two. First of all, which court was the court that heard the case where there was discussion about certifying a class of whites?
Mm-hmm. Sure, that actually was right here in Texas. I think that was the Middle District of Texas. The Biden administration has filed an appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals of that decision, but it did enjoin the program altogether and nationwide and certify a class of white plaintiffs who allege that they are being harmed by the program.
Okay, and so if the Biden administration fails on appeal, what do you see as the effect of that case on MWBE programs across the country? I know that's a Texas case, so I know it's definitely an issue here if they fail.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at this point, it's a nationwide class action, so it would affect, you know, all 50 states and the territories. So it has, in that sense, a very broad reach.
So it is a class action. It's
a nationwide class action with a nationwide injunction. Yes, that's why the Texas case, there are all these other ones that have been filed, but most of them are stayed now because of the ruling here in Texas. So it certainly does have that national reach. I mean, you know, my concern, and this, you know, this will be a judgment call for the Department of Justice and the lawyers at USSDA. And I actually have talked to some of the DOJ lawyers about this because I've been working with them off and on with these issues for, I don't know, 15 years. So they call me because I'm like the canary in the coal mine person. That the concern would be that if they appeal it, let's say we lose at the Court of Appeals, at the Fifth Circuit, which is Texas and Louisiana, and is certainly, if not the most conservative federal circuit court, right on up there. Let's say we lose. What do? Do we appeal to the Supreme Court? Well, maybe not. You know, sometimes maybe just, you know, cut your losses and go, because I have to be honest. I say it pains me deeply, especially at this point in my career, but I don't count 5 justices who I know will support any kind of race and gender-based program. So let's count them for a second. Brother Clarence, well, he'd been lost from the beginning, okay? We know about Justice Alito. So I guess 2. Now we have Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh, both of whom, when they were lawyers at the Department of Justice, wrote memos saying that they think that the federal US DOT DBE program is unconstitutional. And that's the best grounded program in the country. So now I'm up to 4. Justice Roberts, I don't know. Amy Coney Barrett, well, I'll tell you, I'm not holding my breath about her because when she was on the Court of Appeals in Chicago, you know, of course, which is really my hometown, she signed off on an opinion that said that being called the N-word at work was not per se a hostile work environment. Doesn't give me a lot of comfort. So we might just decide to say, you know what? We're just going to stay where we are. And that decision got made in a little bit different context, but directly in a challenge to an MWBE program. Shelby County, Tennessee, which is Memphis, was sued about its program. This actually case was filed a couple of years ago. And when you think about the history of Memphis and the civil rights movement, you know, that what, Shelby County can't do something? but they got sued. They had a disparity study, not done by me, I'm mercifully happy to say, but, and they decided to just settle the case and not try to go any further in a weak study, but paid the plaintiffs their attorney's fees, about $350,000 or so, and dropped the program. And as painful as that was, I think it was probably the right choice, because the federal courts are not our friends at this point. And that's why anybody who wants to have a program really needs to make sure that they have their evidentiary house in order, because you don't want to be the low-hanging fruit for these right-wing legal think tank groups to go running around saying, oh, let me take off this one. So it's all pretty discouraging. So I like to end these the last month or so with these cases, because I want everybody else to be as scared as I am, because it's a very frightening time.
Well, it is. And I mean, that's why I asked the question. And I wanted to know, as far as the appeals process, what do you see as the timeline for this? Because what I'm thinking is that we're going to have to move fairly quickly with regard to trying to create programs that, fit the bases that you listed here and get them into play. So what do you see as the timeline?
Well, I mean, these cases don't move that quickly. The statutes enjoin, so the Biden administration may be trying to get some type of expedited briefing schedule, but I wouldn't be looking for anything for at least another 6 months or so. Court of Appeals, they just don't move that quick.
That is really important, Carol, for you to bring that up, because I think that's the basis for the conversation. It's for everybody on this call to be organized and moving to ask, how quickly can we get these programs, the studies done, how quickly programs in place. And as Commissioner said at the outset, it's extraordinarily important for you all to be the boots on the ground, and to be the voices that we need beyond just his, to start in the directions that we need you all to push. And I feel like Bishop Dixon was supposed to be on the call, but he did mention that the NAACP would be doing a series of sign-on letters to start sending out these requests. For those of you who are interested in joining those letters, and you can let us know, and we can get you in contact with him. But it is extraordinarily important.
And Sasha, before I go, if I might, because I got to get to court. So 2 things. One, we sent a letter to where? We sent it to San Jacinto Community College, HISD, the head of it, and the trustees, and Lone Star Community College. Is that it? We've done those 3. Yeah. Yes. So, and we are organizing. You can Google school districts, community colleges in Harris County. It's a good 25 school districts. I'd say send to all of them, even the ones where you don't think there's somebody sensitive. Katie, if they get ready to go to a bond election, you got to be prepared to make a little good noise, as John Lewis would say. We're organizing a letter through my office of other elected officials to sign, so that these entities feel a little pressure. Bishop Dixon's organizing one for the civil rights groups, NAACP, LULAC, those groups. I suggest you all do one, chamber people on it, all of you, all of the voices. And then I suggest you find people. It's easy. You can do it by Zoom now. Sign up at the meeting and go speak. Now we're going to help, but I want your help so we don't do it all. You got me? I'm on a bike ride and think of this, and there's movement at Houston Community College. We sent a letter, pulled up the names of the trustees. I called Chancellor Maldonado, spoke to him, and he responded. When we talked first, he thought it would cost $1 million, and I pulled together the research. I think we paid $650 at the county. I didn't even try to negotiate with Colette. I need to get it done quick. I wasn't in a position, Colette. You had the gun to my head. I had to get it done quick. But the port, 300, the other one 300 and something. But you need to sign up at these groups and go speak. Most of your members, you deal with them. When I talk to them about this, they get some focus on their contract. Now I understand if I tell them, don't be transactional. So I have to tell them, I don't want to sit down and talk about your contract. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Pull off these handcuffs, French cuffs, put on handcuffs. Talk about your contract. But that's the role of a chamber. It's a shame we waited so long before we put pressure on Harris County. You know, this really is an Atlanta moment. And I can't help what happens with the courts. I know we've got to have programs that are prepared. So that's that. And we'll do drafts of the letters. You can change them. We'll give you our letter. And, you know, we don't want you to do like some people would do. Oh, Rodney Ellis asked me to come down here. I'm not doing any contracts. You know, I made a good living off of MWBE programs around the country. So it's something you believe. Now I'm gonna close on this before I go. Jesse Jackson used to get this line all the time when he's raising money. And I'm not raising money. He wants some money. He'd say, imagine if you'd written a check to Martin Luther King. You got me? So just imagine, don't wait till this is over with. And then when we all gone, you can go say, oh, I got it done. This is your moment. All right. Now I'm going to get around here, do my fight on redistricting. I got to go. I don't mess this up when I get out of here, do I?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's
I'm going to sign it to you if I figure out. Y'all keep talking, but I got to figure out how to get out of here. And I didn't slip when I put my suit on, let y'all. Okay, how do I get out of this?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ellis.
Thank you.
Together. Thank you.
I see well can shine. Now I push end. I don't stop this meeting, do I?
If you push end, make sure it doesn't say end entire call or end whole call.
Oh, it does. So what do I do?
You
Put
just,
lead meeting, hit lead meeting, and
yes,
assign it to you.
Leave. Yes.
Assign.
Yep. Somebody
I
else is supposed to be on.
Okay. I'm looking for your name. There, I'm gonna assign it to you, Nisha. I don't see her name.
Okay.
I'm gonna assign it to Nisha. Is that okay?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Are there other questions? Thank you guys so much for joining, but this is extraordinarily important right now. And so we wanted to make sure we pull people together, given that there is a lot of buzz around these programs, and just trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page and seeing if there are ways that we can assist, but also making sure that you are working with one another to push forth on a regional approach to getting this stuff done.
Sasha, this is Kimberly Shaw with the Regional Black Contractors Association, and I just wanted to thank you for hosting the call and say hello to everyone on the call. I'll drop my information in the chat box just to stay connected and provide any type of assistance and support that we can on our front. We have opened up an office in Houston, and I will say that the advocacy that we have seen in the DFW area, and Colette can attest to this also, I know you're very active here, there's a lot of progress happening with the increase in utilization of Black contractors and Black businesses. And of course, I say Black because that's the group of people that I represent. I know MWBE is very important, but with Black contractors and Black businesses being the lowest of utilized businesses, we just continue to keep our focus very lasered in that area. So again, I look forward to it. I know that the success here has been, again, definitely due to policy changes, but also cultivating those relationships with the procurement directors, the evaluation committees, the CEOs, and just making sure that they understand, how this can be possible. I know when you look at it holistically, it can look very overwhelming, but when you really get down to it, it's quite simple. So.
Yeah, can I echo that? Kimberly, nice to see you. I wasn't expecting to see my Dallas crew here. That's great. But in the end, it's about political power. Because, I do policies for a living, but I'm here to tell you that I'm useless. All I am is a tool that you can use to help get you somewhere. But if people aren't willing to come together and exercise the political power that you have, then you can't make it happen. But to just see just the names on these calls, and some of you I know, hi there, Al, I see you there. And I know that man knows how to speak up. You got to get together, and I think what Commissioner Ellis is doing here, and I know Sasha's here to help and leadership. Some people, there was something about what metrics. Get your letters together, start going to meet with people, If you represent individual businesses or you're with chambers, to echo Kimberly's part, all we can do is give you policies to help open the doors, but people got to be willing to walk through them and push some. Make sure that you're going to the board meetings. You want to meet with the procurement director or the head of engineering or whatever, and put some pressure on these people. Nothing ever got achieved in the area about race relations and equity relations, with everybody just making nice and not telling people this is what you have to do if you want our vote, if you want our support, and we're going to make our voices heard. And that's not my role, but I'm here to help and give you all the data and stuff you need. I'll do that part, but y'all have to do the other part. And what you're doing is much more important than anything I can do.
Thank you, Colette. And everyone has put in their information in the chat. What will happen is I'll reach out to you all. All of you had to register to be a part of this conversation. So what will happen is you'll get a follow-up email. If you'd like to share your email and your contact information with everyone else on this call, we will ask your permission to do that. We will send around a contact list. And then if there is someone on the call asking if there is a committee that can be formed, this can be the start of something like, we can continue to convene. What will also come to you all is going to be the letters that Commissioner Ellis has already started to send out to the community colleges that he mentioned in the request for transparent data to HISD. And those are the focuses right now, but this can expand. There are so many more entities that don't have these programs in this region. And it's very unfortunate, as Commissioner Ellis said, we are very late to the party because other large areas have already done this decades ago. And so we want to make sure that we are collectively using the same voice to push for policies that are going to expand access to MWBE. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and call. Please be on the lookout for email from me and Commissioner Ellis as a follow-up, sending those documents and asking for your permission to share your contact with others on the call.